Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Cody Cassidy, and I'm the Outreach Associate here at GuideStar. We're excited to have you all join us today to learn more about how your United Way can benefit from GuideStar. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. We are recording today's event, so rest easy if you missed a point or would like to go back to review anything. That recording will be sent to you via email, along with a link to the slides from today's presentation within just a few days. And we've also blocked off a period of time at the end of today's event to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. If you don't see the box yet, you just see the header, click the plus button next to the questions header and that'll expand it out. I have just sent a test message in that box. You should see it right now. That's where you drop questions. And with that, I am happy to get this event started and introduce Adrian Bordone, our Vice President of Strategic Partnerships here at GuideStar. Adrian, take it away.
Thanks, Cody. Welcome, everyone. I appreciate your time this afternoon. We have a very full agenda. We have an hour set aside. As Cody mentioned, we hope to conclude the content portion of our presentation at about the 50-minute mark, so that will allow us to field some questions. I also will be monitoring the chat, the questions piece on the side. If there are things that are really specific to the content that is being shared, I'll try to pause one of our presenters. But we do hope that this is an interactive webinar, and we look forward to your participation and any questions you might have. I'm thrilled to be able to welcome some of your colleagues to today's webinar. We have Ayeola Fortune, Director of Youth Services and Education with United Way Worldwide, as well as Julie Russell and Rosie Stafford Smith, partners from the United Way of Greater St. Louis. Julie, the Senior Vice President of Planning and Evaluation, and Rosie, the Director of Executive Initiatives and Investor Relations. So each of us are going to have some time to share some thoughts and updates with you today. Again, as we go through the presentation, if you have questions, please post them. We'll do our best to field any questions that come in, both during and at the conclusion of today's session. And then any questions we don't get to, we'll do our darndest to reply to you directly after today's webinar. Next slide, Cody. So we're going to do 3 polls as part of today's webinar. We try to make these webinars a little more interactive, encouraging folks to participate and not just listen and do other work, which we certainly understand and recognize. But if you take a moment and answer this question, we'd appreciate it. How important is GuideStar to you and your organization? Pick one of the following responses: essential, we could not do our work without it; important, nice to have; or we don't really use GuideStar. We will allow this poll to be open for a moment. I'm going to take another 5 seconds here. Thank you for your responses. So there you go. Thank you, Cody. So by and large, we're really thrilled that 19% at both the essential and nice to have, with the majority falling right there in the important category. So that's great. In many ways, we're talking to an audience that recognizes the importance of our work and in many ways perhaps uses tools and resources that we already make available. I will tell you that we have about 1,400 United Way users. These are users who've registered in an account and are some way associated with or affiliated with the United Way. That's a pretty large number. It's as large as any single sort of cohort of users. Of course, that would include all United Ways around the country. And last year, United Ways were responsible for about 34,000 organization searches on GuideStar.org and about 12,000 logins. So certainly the type of use that we see within the United Way community does reveal to us that we're an important part of your work, and the poll responses certainly seem consistent with that. Next slide, Cody. I'm going to go over a quick agenda here. I'm going to share some updates from GuideStar. Ayeola is going to provide you with some insights and updates on the United Way results framework, and then Julie and Rosie are really going to deep dive into the ways in which they're using GuideStar at the United Way of Greater St. Louis. As I mentioned, we'll have some Q&A at the conclusion of today's webinar. We'll also try to do our best to pause for questions if they're very specific during the course of the content. Next slide. So a few updates I want you to be aware of. Everyone on this call should know that GuideStar has a partnership with United Way Worldwide that makes a number of tools available to you as United Ways at a discount. Those discounts range from 20 to 50% of market rate. You should also know that many organizations, many United Ways are using Charity Check. Many other United Ways are also using what's called our professional search. This is the most complete search function. It's a fee-based search. It is much more advanced than our basic free search. Effective today, this rolled out last week, in fact, GuideStar Pro now includes Charity Check. So if you are, check your accounts. If you're using both of those tools and perhaps paying for both of those tools, even though you're likely getting a discount at the through the United Way, you may be able to remove one of those tools from your account because Charity Check is now included in GuideStar Pro. Some other quick updates that you should be aware of. We are very actively pursuing an agenda related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our work was just, or our proposal was just funded by the Kellogg Foundation. So some of you have participated in some of our advisory discussions around how we're going to be taking client aggregated, de-identified client data, census data, staff and board data to provide better insights so that donors like yourselves and practitioners in the field can better highlight ways in which they're incorporating equity and inclusion in their programs and their results. If you have an interest in that, please reach out to me or someone in the GuideStar team. That is going to become a very active project with us now that we've secured some funding from the Kellogg Foundation. I know United Ways often look at the capacity of their organizations in their community to deliver results. I have a slide here today that provides an update on some work we're doing on the research side, looking at the financial health of nonprofit organizations. We do have a new tool that's coming into the marketplace that I want to share with you, and then remind you, if you haven't heard of it, GuideStar for grant applications. This has been in the marketplace for about 13 months now, since January of last year, but it's an important tool that I'll make sure you're aware of. It really helps streamline and build efficiency in the grant application process for your communities of practice. Next slide, Cody. So as a reminder, GuideStar is focused on, next slide, Cody, focused on pulling and aggregating and disseminating data. That's IRS data, of course, 990 data, as well as increasingly data that's coming directly from nonprofit organizations. We pull that data in and then disseminate it, next slide, Cody, into both our partner channels and our users of GuideStar.org. So the far right represent individuals, as I mentioned a moment ago, more than 1,400 of you who are affiliated with United Ways who are logging in and out of GuideStar to check, get information on the charities and organizations that you're seeking to serve and support. Increasingly, however, we're seeing that, and forgive me, that on the far right side, the 1,400 accounts that United Ways have represent a fraction of the nearly 8 million individuals who logged in and out of GuideStar last year to get information on the charities and nonprofits that they're seeking to support. That middle column is actually increasingly prominent and popular in the sector. We distribute with nonprofits' permission data to over 200 data partners. Next slide, Cody. These include, go ahead and hit again and again, any number of organizations. Amazon Smile, of course, one of our most popular. Facebook, which you saw, is so new it preceded the other logos on the list here. That relationship was solidified last November, but we weren't able to make it public until about a month ago. So these are organizations here. These represent a small fraction of the more than 200 companies and partners that gain access to nonprofit data through our API network framework. And you'll actually hear Rosie speak a little bit about that today. But the real importance here is that increasingly, and we estimate between 20 and 30 million people are seeing nonprofit data that is coming through GuideStar, whether directly from GuideStar.org or through one of our partner channels. So it's really imperative that organizations understand how to make sure they're representing themselves and recognizing that increasingly the data that we're providing folks is helping them make a first and lasting impression of the type of organization they may want to support. Next slide, Cody. Keep going. So, and again, we really focus on two primary areas. I know there are quite a number of administrative and finance folks on today's call. Money for Good study, if you haven't heard of it, I would strongly recommend you look it up and download a copy. Heavily funded by the Gates Foundation. It's got some tremendous insights that monitor and track donor behavior related to data utilization. But essentially what their data and research was telling them that donors are looking to increase the trust they have in the nonprofits and beneficiaries, primarily, you'll see in a moment, related to financial information. And then they were feeling overwhelmed and ill-equipped to make good decisions. So GuideStar really sits at that transactional center point. Next slide, Cody. Sorry for the font here, but notice that across the board, donors are looking for financial information and evidence of effectiveness to drive both net new giving and increases in giving year over year. I'm sure this resonates with everyone on this call. I'm a former board member on the United Way of Central Maryland's board, and certainly we grapple with these issues every day, and these are the same things that organizations that you're supporting in your communities are struggling with. That being said, it's really the center point of what GuideStar is trying to do, provide this a forum and format for amplifying the effectiveness of the organizations that are in our communities, as well as demonstrating that we are competent and effective stewards of the contributions that we're receiving. Next slide, Cody. I mentioned a moment ago that we have just released in, let's see, late fall of last year, a report highlighting where organizations are financially. We know that this report was produced in partnership with Sea Change Capital and Oliver Wyman. It actually won the Human Services Advocacy Research Project of the Year in New York City in 2016. The important thing I want to share with you is increasingly we have visibility into the correlation between the financial stability of an organization and its potential impact. Additionally, we have an increasing set of data that helps us as trustees and boards and advisors and consultants in our community to understand what it means when the organizations that are doing great work are essentially underwater or have so little capital reserves that they're strained beyond belief. We know increasingly that there's a subset, certainly far less than half of the organizations in the marketplace today who are financially stable. But I encourage you, if you want to learn more about this research and these reports and want to bring some of this intelligence to bear in your community, please reach out. Reach out to us through our community if you're a registered user, or reach out to me personally, and I'll make sure you get copies of that information. Again, helpful guidance for the community of giving to better understand and benchmark ways in which organizations are striving and struggling to demonstrate their ability to deliver impact in their communities. Next slide. A quick reminder, of course, you've heard me reference several times, and I know there are a number of financial folks and administrators on today's call. You have access to a tool called Financial Scan. This is a tool that's available at a discount to you as a United Way partner. This is an offering that we make to the marketplace in partnership with Nonprofit Finance Fund. This is a way in which if you're doing competitive grant making and you want to see how an organization's finances compare longitudinally to up to 5 peer organizations in the community, if you're really looking hard at determining where to get the best bang for your buck, FinScan or Financial Scan can certainly help you do that. Next slide. Continue. Those of you who are familiar with GuideStar historically have recognized this. This was our old user interface. Next slide, Cody. Those of you who are in the data in GuideStar on a regular basis, this is let's see, about 14, 16 months now we've had this new user interface. The reason why we highlight it is we've really tried to push 990 data, even though we recognize the importance of that financial information. We're also trying to drive toward results. You recall the Money for Good research tells us that folks are looking for financial evidence of sort of competence and sustainability as well as program and results data, and that's going to drive a significant part of the rest of our presentation today. Next slide. Keep going, Cody. Slide through all 4 of the levels. So GuideStar today offers levels of transparency. These are seals that encourage organizations to claim and update their profile. This is information you want to share both with your own leadership at the United Way as well as with your partner organizations. I believe we have an attendee on today's call from the United Way of the National Capital Area. We are in dialogue with a number of United Ways to help the community of practice, the organizations in their community, capitalize on the fact that as the higher you climb in providing additional voluntary information for free on your GuideStar profile, the more likely that you are going to make a positive impression to one of these 30 million viewers who may be researching your organization through GuideStar.org or our partner network. Next slide. And Cody, just go ahead and slip through these pieces. So the profile, of course, is a mechanism, if you're taking advantage of it, that reveals a tremendous amount of information. An individual can view results. They can learn about the strategies that an organization uses to generate those results. They can compare financial information for the organization year over year to track correlation between income and expenses, look at asset performance, etc., board information, and increasingly our most prominent users from an organization perspective are including constituent feedback, logos, capitalizing on the Donate Now button that they can post on their profile as well. Next slide. I mentioned this at the commencement of our webinar today. GuideStar is going to be rolling out a tool in about a month called GuideStar Local. This is a way in which a community of giving, a giving circle, a community of foundation, or a United Way can take advantage of the fact that GuideStar, you can now take a subset of GuideStar's data and make it available through your web page. So what you see here is an example of a United Way web page in the upper left-hand corner. If you have a web page like this, and that web page then links through a Get Involved or in our work section to a list of organizations in your community that you may maintain with address, contact, and website information. The GuideStar Local feature, which is a widget, it's essentially 3 lines of code. You can drop it into that page, and then when someone goes onto that page to search for organizations in your community, they will see only the organizations that you've defined by your geographic domain. That may be a multi-county domain, it may be a zip code domain, etc. But the benefit of GuideStar Local is really to refine and streamline a user's experience, focus their time and attention on organizations in your community, and give you the opportunity to partner with, if you choose to, a world-class resource like GuideStar and relieve yourselves of the responsibility from an FTE perspective of maintaining a list of 10, 20, 50, dozens to hundreds of nonprofits in your community. So if you're interested in learning more about this offering, it's not yet available in the marketplace. It's going to be available at the end of April, but we certainly have a tremendous amount of information we can share with you in draft format until that becomes available. Next slide, Cody. Continue. Thank you. The last piece we'll remind folks of today, GuideStar for grant applications. Profile, again, our profile data is focused on aggregating and disseminating common intelligence about organizations and the communities we serve. That dissemination process doesn't just go to our partner organizations. It also allows organizations to auto-populate grant applications. So what you see here is an example of GuideStar for grant applications in use. Again, if an organization's profile data is up to date, and if a funder like the United Way is using a grant application that allows for this integration, which I'll share again in a moment, then an organization, when they land on the grant on the online application page, can autocomplete commonly asked questions. This generally is the first 10 to 15 questions of a grant application, mission information, board information, 990 information, etc. So most of that information can take a user about an hour to create in a grant application. With GuideStar for grant applications, it takes less than 5 minutes. Let's take a look at it in action real quick. Cody, next slide. If this has been turned on through the grants management software vendor, again, you can certainly ask GuideStar to help you, and we will, but it really happens through your grants management software vendor. I'll share with you some of the partners we're working with today in a moment. But if this has been activated, then a user will see the ability to copy their GuideStar profile data into the grant application. Next slide, Cody. That information will reveal which questions can be auto-populated. Next slide, Cody. Keep going. Keep going. And then with those questions that have been auto-populated would show with a GuideStar logo. Excuse me. Keep going, Cody. Thank you. And next slide. Responses can be edited in the application itself. Again, if you're interested in learning more about this functionality, it's a real benefit to the community of practice. Obviously, tremendous improvement in efficiency of submission of grant applications. We currently partner with these grants management software vendors. If you use any of them, we'd love to help you understand how you could turn this on and save your grantees and grant-seeking organizations a tremendous amount of time. Next slide, Cody. So in conclusion, make sure that you're taking advantage of your discounts. If you're using any of the GuideStar products listed here, consider turning on and using GuideStar for grant applications. Contact me if you want to learn more about our research projects or our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative, and consider becoming a member if you want to be even more closely aligned with the work that we do here at GuideStar. Next slide, Cody. We'll open this poll question and transition to Ayeola. How many GuideStar tools do you use? Does your United Way use? These might include G4G, Charity Check, Bulk Charity Check, Financial Scan, or GuideStar Professional Search, etc. Let's see if you can, folks can answer those questions real quick. Monitor. And let's reveal results. Wow, okay. So tremendous amount of folks on today's call are not using any of these tools. I would say that if you're a United Way and not using Charity Check or Bulk Charity Check, that would be a super smart place to start. This is the most heavily used feature or tool that GuideStar offers within the United Way community. It's intended to provide you with the peace of mind that you know that the donations that you're collecting and then distributing are going to organizations whose charitable status is confirmed on the day that you're cutting that check. This is a compliance feature and function that is our premier product, really industry leading. In many ways, could be a great first step for you to learn a little bit more about the work that we do. Next slide. Great. Ayeola, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Adrian, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you and share a little bit about a United Way effort that's been underway for about a year, and it's an effort to collect data from our network that better demonstrates our common impact and shared value, just as you need to use tools like Charity Check to make sure that the agencies and partners you are investing your community's dollars in are going to deliver results for the individuals and families they touch. The companies that run United Way campaigns that are global partners for us, for our network, also have that same desire to understand what's the impact of United Way, both in your individual United Ways and then what's our collective impact as a network. Next slide, please. So I'm happy to share very briefly today. I want to tell you why we're doing this. I want to share a little bit about what the framework itself looks like, and then direct you where you can find out more information. And so really, this is our global results framework is our way to begin to capture results for donors, aggregate results that help us better tell that story of collective impact. What are we frequently at United Way Worldwide get asked by many of our global corporate partners, what is our impact, what is our return on investment for the footprint that we particularly care most about, so the 15 or 20 markets where we have United Way campaigns at our local affiliates, wanting to better understand what is that ROI. And so it's really important for us to be able to tell that story. And that kind of information sits at a nexus between sort of our, annual report headlines, our ability, to engage millions of volunteers and invest $5 billion globally across our 1,800 United Ways across the globe and 1,100 here in the U.S., and then your individual ability to tell that story at a local level for your local companies and partners. We need that mid-range level, that ability to say what that looks like at an aggregate level for a company, that's interested either looking at that as a global footprint or a state level footprint or a regional footprint. We need to simplify and align results. If you look at our network, we're diverse. You work in a community context, and so there's a lot of issues that you're working on locally, but we need to be able to tell a story around a limited set of common indicators that we all agree to report data on that shows meaningful progress on the goals that relate most closely to our mission. So while there's a lot of data we could collect, our framework ultimately has about 40 indicators across 4 impact areas because we had to settle on what are those indicators that are the best proxy measures for telling a compelling story of the impact you all are delivering in your communities. And then convey scale. We've gotten very good at storytelling and being able to demonstrate how the work we're doing in community affects individual lives, and that's fundamentally important. It personalizes the work, it humanizes it, but we have to be able to tell our investors for how many people are we helping them achieve that condition. And so we have to be able to look at our results across our network within a broader scale. And then again, I said, about as compelling, we need to pair the data, the aggregate data, with that compelling, those individual stories that are compelling. Next slide, please. So here's the framework. And if you read across the top, that's the headline. What our framework seeks to convey using aggregate data is how as United Ways we mobilize resources to strengthen communities that changes lives. And so we have a set of indicators, again, 40 plus, that align to each aspect of the framework. And so on the resource mobilization, that's really, again, about volunteer engagement, about the resources that you all are able to both raise, but then invest in community. And then in strengthening community, so what does that investment look like? We are well known for the work that GuideStar, for instance, helps you do in terms of reinvesting that in local agencies and partners that then deliver direct services. What we also want to be able to convey is that you're more than the sum of those parts, and that's where the second box comes into play, that there are things that each of your United Ways are doing individually and that we're doing collectively to drive systems change. So that's the community engagement efforts, that's your policy and advocacy work, the convening of community partners and the convening of citizens who need a space to talk about issues of concern to them. That's work that we do to increase visibility on issues. the partnerships and collaborations that we are helping to lead and facilitate. The resources that we may never control directly, but that are leveraged because of the good work that we're doing that brings others in that are also willing to invest. So we really need to demonstrate how we show up in that second box, the capacity building space that strengthens communities overall. And then finally, to what end? And so our 4 impact areas, your United Ways may be working in all or one of these areas, but collectively, this is where we show up, and that's childhood success, youth success, economic mobility, and access to health. And so underneath each of those are key indicators for us that are proxy measures of making progress in those areas. And so that's what, at the highest level, we're collecting data around. This is our summary framework. There are a set of indicators that sit behind more detailed level indicators that sit behind the framework that I will show you where you go and find that additional information. But for the purposes of today's call, just wanted to give you the framework at the highest level. So this is the what. Next slide, please. And this is what's in it for your United Way. So from your local individual United Ways perspective, it's the ability to generate your own reports from the platform that we will be using to share your results locally. If you have a framework, if you've done a lot of the hard work that you're going to hear about shortly from our colleagues, Julie and Rosie, it's an opportunity to align. But say you aren't that far down in the process, you have the ability to use the platform we're providing to generate those impact reports for local donors and partners. Related to that is the ability to align. So we expect that this framework, that you have local frameworks, you have local community priorities, but what companies are looking for is, so how does that fit within the broader footprint in which we are working and partnering with United Way? And this framework gives you a basis from which to demonstrate that alignment. It is to continue to position our network strategically as the philanthropic partner of choice, that we want key investors, companies, high net worth donors to see us as essential to driving community change and want us at the table. And so we need to deliver on results to be able to demonstrate our shared value. A couple other pieces, you will have access to aggregate data that's being reported by your colleagues. So the ability to start to look at best practice within our network based on a common set of results, that derive from a common set of indicators. And it's the ability to customize what you're reporting. We don't expect everybody to report on all 40 of those indicators, but it's the ability to have your work show up based on what data you are collecting, what community priorities you are driving through your strategies and through your program investment and the other sweat equity that you're investing in driving community change. And then finally, for those of you that want to use the platform we're using to aggregate results across our network, we're able to pass our cost savings and the user rate that we have with our partner on to you. So that's more of a specific tactical piece of cost savings. So we hope that you'll learn more. Next slide, please. And come along with us in this journey. We will only be as successful as we have United Ways agreeing to report their data. We're rolling this out this year, so opening up that portal for people to begin reporting those indicators. On your screen now is where you can go to find out more. So that first link will take you to United Way Online, where we are housing all information related to the Global Results Framework. And you're always welcome to reach out directly to me or my colleague Hannah, and both of our emails are on the screen. So I want to thank you very much for allowing me to share a little bit about some really exciting work in our network today, and I'll turn it back over to Adrian.
Thank you, Ayeola. Certainly this aligns well with what GuideStar is striving to do in the marketplace, and we stand ready to support you and your partners in your efforts. So kudos, and certainly expect to learn some more at the CLC event as well, where we will be and watching and listening and waiting to help. We want to transition now to a really practical piece that Julie and Rosie are going to run us through, which is super intriguing. It's ways in which they're putting their resources to work in St. Louis, and they're going to review a technical component where they're actually taking advantage of GuideStar's APIs. This is an application program interface, pull data into their implementation of Salesforce to support the work that they're doing. A quick reminder, we do have, if you have questions, please drop them into the question tab on the right-hand side. We are monitoring that. We'll pause to make sure those get answered at the conclusion of today's webinar. Julie?
Great. Thank you, Adrian. Rosie and I really appreciate this opportunity to share with folks how our local United Way has really leveraged some of the GuideStar tools and resources to advance some of our strategies. Next slide, please. More specifically, we're going to just talk about some of our strategic initiatives, particularly related to outcomes measurement, which parallels a lot with what Ayeola just talked about, as well as our efforts around collective impact and corporate social responsibility. Next slide. But before we get into the three areas, I'd like just to provide a little bit of context and background. In my role as Senior Vice President of Planning and Evaluation, I oversee our efforts related to strategic planning, performance and outcomes measurement, research and grant writing, as well as community response, which includes 211. The mission of our United Way is essentially to help people live their best possible lives. We are the fourth largest United Way in the country, and last year we raised a little over $75 million for our community. And we have about 150 employees, so while we are quite large, just the folks should know that GuideStar is helpful no matter what size you are. So even if you have a one-person shop, the GuideStar tools and resources are still really helpful, because essentially, you know, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're doing similar work in terms of generating resources and investing resources. Next slide, please. And at our United Way, the way that we do that is through our 5 impact areas, which are to provide food and shelter, foster learning, improve health, establish financial stability, and strengthen community. So this is kind of our version of education, income, and health. And we do that by leveraging what we consider our 4 strategic advantages, or our 4 core competencies, which are our network of partners, our power to convene, our knowledge of local issues, and our accountability system. Next slide, please. So in 2014, we underwent a strategic planning process where we identified our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats. And like many of the United Ways, you know, we're experiencing challenges due to the rapidly changing philanthropic environment. Particularly the drivers of change that we're seeing relate to technological advances, demographic changes as a result of the millennials outpacing the baby boomers in the workplace, and as Adrian referenced and Ayeola referenced, that demand for effectiveness and accountability and impact and return on investment from our donors. So on this screen here, you see just an overview of our strategic goals and some of our key initiatives. We're going to talk about 3 of those key initiatives, the first one being what's in Zone 4, which is increasing an emphasis on defining standardized outcomes, benchmarking innovation, and measuring and communicating impact. Next slide, please. So we're going to drill down on that one and then just talk about the GuideStar tool that we use, which is the Common Results Catalog that Adrian talked about earlier. Next slide. So at our United Way, we've always had a very rigorous investment process where we evaluate our grantees according to a set of quality standards that looks in depth at their programs, their finances, their governance, and their administration. We have about 400 volunteers who we train throughout the community who really serve as the eyes and the ears of those 200,000 donors that we have. And we utilize the GuideStar profile and information to help us vet those grantees and those organizations. Next slide. And we do that through a tiered framework. So this framework here, you can see we have the stages of our investment process across the top, and we have a tiered system for how we evaluate and monitor those investments based on the investment amount. But for all of our investments, we utilize that charity check in GuideStar to verify the 501c3 status of the organizations that we're seeking to invest in. Next slide. So one of the key initiatives that I'd mentioned revolved around outcomes. So while we always had a very rigorous process around how we evaluated the effectiveness of our agencies, the way that we collected that outcome data from our agencies did not allow us to measure or aggregate and communicate the impact of our investments. And so over the course of the last 2 to 3 years, we went through the process of defining a common set of standard indicators, which align very ticely with the ones that Ayeola talked about, and also aligns very nicely with the ones that are in the common results catalog. When we did the research over the data that the agencies had reported us, we found that over the last few years, we had over 5,000 different outcome and indicator statements from our agencies, which, as you can imagine, we could do nothing with. I mean, we could not aggregate any of that, and I would say probably half of what they had reported were actually outputs and not outcomes. So we went through the process of coming up with some standard indicators. We looked at best practice repositories, including the Global Results Framework and the Common Results Catalog, as well as what other United Ways were doing. We looked at what Ready by 21, which is our collective impact initiative locally, was doing, and as a result, we reduced that 5,000 down to 60, about 60 indicators that our agencies now report on. Next slide. So the Common Results Catalog really helps us to measure and communicate our results and impact. Next slide. And here you have, for the first time really in our history, we're able to communicate and share some very specific outcome results with our donors. We've never been able to do this before, but because we were able to leverage the GuideStar tools and the Global Results Framework, we're able to produce this sort of aggregation and results for our donors. Next slide, please. So the data that we collected not only helps us to communicate our impact, but we're also able to utilize that to inform capacity building efforts. So as Ayeola mentioned, that systems level work is really important, and being able to strengthen our service providers and their ability to collect data, because our data is only as good as theirs. And so over the course of the last year, we provided workshop trainings on different modules related to performance management and measurement and data quality and integrity. And then we also did what we call learning circles around 3 of our impact areas, where we brought service providers together to really share best practices around outcomes measurement and assessment tools and benchmarking. And then we also provide individual consultation where we meet with our grantees one-on-one to really provide that thought leadership with them and to really help them strengthen their capacity for performance management. Next slide. So that leads us into our next area here, which ties to our collective impact work. So we realize that there's no one organization that can do it alone, and that we need to partner with government and health institutions and schools and corporations and donors in order to really have a collective approach and impact within our community. And so our strategic initiative under Zone 3 here, where we leverage the GuideStar Pro, really is about leveraging those partnerships and investments to focus on youth development on an insulated career to career, cradle to career continuum. Next. So here, we realized that we needed to move away from just single issues and organizations and really focus on aligning people and programs and policies around that common agenda to improve outcomes for youth. Next. Next. You can go again. So here you see, and again, there we go. So here you see just really an illustration of really the fragmented systems that maybe you have in your communities, that we certainly have in our community, where we just need better alignment, for those individuals and families who are seeking help, so that it's just much more efficient and much more effective. Next. Next. So the GuideStar Pro, as Adrian mentioned earlier, really provides us the data that allows us to have a regional context and perspective for service coordination and that system alignment, so that we have next what looks more like this. So an insulated pipeline for children and families versus the disjointed and fragmented systems that we currently have. Next. And really, the GuideStar Pro helps us with the 5 conditions of collective impact, and they're a little cut off here, but the first one being that common agenda, and then secondly, shared measurement, and then mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, and that backbone support. So these tools within GuideStar really help us to really understand the landscape in which we're working and to better align those providers and resources. So now that I've covered the 2 products on the resource investment side, I'm going to hand it over to Rosie, who's going to talk about 2 of our strategies that are really on the resource generation side.
Great, thank you. So if you'll go to the next slide. And so as our strategic plan was adopted about 3.5 years ago, part of it called for us to put the donor at the center of everything that we do. And what I'm particularly charged with in the executive office as our director of investor relations is working with our high net worth individuals. So these are individuals that are giving $25,000 undesignated to our local United Way each year, but they are also investing charitably into the community beyond that. So what we are aiming to do is to be that complete charitable solution for their philanthropy. We want for them to come to us if they're interested in investing in the community in any way. We want to be the clearinghouse for those investments. We want to help advise them on making high-impact investments. But to be able to do this type of high-touch service at scale, we have to have technology be able to support our work. And so I'm actually going to jump ahead 2 slides, please, in the interest of time. So this is what we look at as our customized philanthropy. This is the spectrum of services that we offer. This is based on a lot of research into what companies are looking for, particularly to solve their corporate social responsibility and employee engagement initiatives. But it's also looking at what family foundations and high net worth families are looking to do to instill philanthropy across the generations in their family. You'll go to the next slide. I'm going to jump in now to a customized system that we've built to be able to service these high net worth individuals, family foundations, and corporations in their philanthropy. And so we created this system on the Salesforce platform last year and launched it in July. And we are piloting it with about 30 family foundations, corporations, and individuals. So what we do here is often we are getting requests from, let's say, a family foundation who has 3 different generations, each with their own priorities. And so let's say the parent generation is interested in education while the children's generation is interested in fostering income and health. And so we want to be able to provide distinct reporting to each generation of the family, but also be able to roll up those results across the entire family. So what we also have to do is we're vetting these nonprofits that they are asking us to look into and potentially invest in And we need to be able to do that. Sometimes they're sending us maybe 20 or 30 nonprofits at a time and saying, can you look across all of these and let us know which ones align with our interests? So here's an example of an account that we've created for a nonprofit based here in St. Louis called Almost Home. So within our Salesforce system, I created the Almost Home system, but all I had to do was type in their name. If you go to the next slide, I then went into our system to the button that we have called the GuideStar check. So then what it automatically does is queries GuideStar's database and pulls in this entry that you'll see at the bottom where it says Almost Home. So just because I entered that into the nonprofit account in our system, it went ahead and pulled the Almost Home. It only showed up one result because there's only one nonprofit that goes by the name Almost Home. If there were multiples, it would show me all of those results. I also have the ability to search within my results if there are more than one result. So for example, organizations like the Red Cross, I can search within them with some additional words that would help narrow down my field to find the right example of the nonprofit. I would then click that radio button on the left in the middle of the screen to select Almost Home as yes, that's the nonprofit I'm interested in vetting. And click to the next slide. I see this information that it pulls in from GuideStar, and that again tells me this is the right Almost Home. I can click on the click here. You'll see it in two places on this slide in blue that would take me out to the public report on GuideStar system if I wanted to learn more. And what this does is it allows me to see more information if I want to, but I don't have to leave our system if I don't need to. So this prevents me from having to go out to GuideStar, do this searching, or potentially risk transposing the EIN number, and it's just much, much more efficient for us. If you go to the next slide, I've then got it saved on Almost Home, the nonprofit's account record. So you can see I've run the GuideStar report back in July 27th of 2016, and then I've run it again here. So this also for us provides the due diligence that our accounting department needs to say at the point in time that we were issuing a request or we made a recommendation that yes, Almost Home was a valid nonprofit and we would recommend them supporting them, that they were in good standing at that point in time. If you'll go to the next slide. It also pulled in, as you see, all I had entered in was the name of the nonprofit organization, but now it's also pulled in their EIN number, their address, and some other additional information that's not captured on this screen, but it's pulled all that in, so we're not having to hand key in that information. So that's, in the short amount of time, that's how we use this, and look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Rosie. That is remarkable. I have to tell everyone on the call that that's the first time I'm seeing that. I had seen it in preparation for today's call, but the integration with Salesforce and GuideStar is something that more and more organizations are doing. If you're using Salesforce in your organization, certainly we'd love to talk to you about that. That's quite a sophisticated approach that Rosie and Julie and her team in Greater St. Louis are taking, but absolutely the way of the future. I want to pause now. I know we were sort of accelerating through the latter part of our presentation. We have a lot of content to cover. We have 5 or 6 minutes to take questions, and I see them lining up here, which is fantastic. So I'm going to, most of these are really focused on, okay, good. I want to start with some that are a little broader. There are a few that are very specific to charity check functionality, which I'll either try and answer today or shoot responses to folks. They are so specific that I'm concerned that they won't apply to the broader audience. But David asks a question, and Julie, I think it's to you and Rosie. Will there be a presentation on this at CLC? And David, I hope by this, I'm not entirely sure, I don't think you mean the entirety of this presentation, but maybe just their work or Ayola's work. Certainly I know my team from GuideStar will be at CLC. Julie, what will you be talking about at CLC?
Yes, so at CLC in May, there will be a 2-part session. So Ayeola is going to go more in depth around the global results framework, and then part 2 is we're going to have myself and some other local United Ways talking a little more in depth about our own common outcomes framework, our ability to collect data and aggregate that data and communicate impact. So there will be 2 sessions that will build upon each other at CLC.
Fantastic. David, I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, please chime in again. There are a few other questions regarding charity check and compliance with the Patriot Act. I'm going to offer folks a quick snapshot of this, but I will tell you that GuideStar has extensive documentation on this available through our community. But the GuideStar, the charity check function that we utilize takes advantage of, runs of course through the OFAC, which is identifying specially designated nationals or designated global terrorist threats, etc. We also are running against all the standard IRS pieces, the IRS bulletin, the business master file, the Pub 78. The charity check piece that you heard Rosie speak to and Julie mention out loud as well that's really critical is it's essentially real time. So it provides you an auditable record that says at this time, on this date and time stamp, this charity was in good standing, was not in violation of any of the Patriot Act compliance requirements or responsibilities. So certainly there is extensive documentation on this, both in the GuideStar community, which is freely available to all registered users. You can also reach out to me if you want all of our documentation sent to you for consideration regarding how charity check meets that critical compliance need. There was another question that came in from Peter regarding what's the pricing on bulk charity check. So the difference between charity check and bulk charity check for folks on the call who saw those two products distinguished, charity check is really for United Way's who are checking the charitable status of dozens of nonprofit organizations, maybe up to 100. Typically, of course, that requires you to log in with an EIN, get the charitable status out of charity check, etc. But if you're doing hundreds of organizations, or some of our partners do thousands of organizations, I think you heard Julie say, you really probably want to take advantage of bulk charity check, where you send us a list of all the charities you're considering making grants to, and we run it against our database and then report back to you based on a time date stamp for all of the charities. It really takes a process that could be done manually, locally, in hours, and reduces that to minutes. You send it over to us, we can typically turn that around in 1 week or less, often in 48 hours. Let's see. We're coming to the conclusion of our time. There's one more question. I'm going to see if I can read it real quick. Attempt to confirm charities currently in the 990. So, great question from David regarding timing of 990s. Folks should know that GuideStar gets our 990, that an organization has the right to upload its 990 to its profile if they claim their profile. We have many organizations who upload their 990 directly to their profile to make it available to funders and inquiries, etc. But if an organization does not upload its profile, its 990 to its profile, then GuideStar has to wait until the 990 goes to the IRS, and then generally about 3 months for the IRS to group all the 990s that have been received and send them to us, and then it takes us about 3 months to enter all the 990 data into our database. So the timeliness of 990s is a function both of the timeliness of an organization's filing of their 990. We know many organizations take advantage of extensions, so they're not filing right at the conclusion of their fiscal year. Of course, that creates a bit of a delay. And then if the organization chooses not to upload its 990 directly to its profile, then we have to wait until we get it from the IRS, which increases the delay between when that 990 has been filed and when it's available to the public. So again, just like we have a tremendous amount of documentation around how Charity Check can support your due diligence and compliance requirements related to the Patriot Act, I can also provide you with a tremendous amount of insight into ways in which we can help accelerate the access to 990 data for partners in your community, as well as provide you with a little more context for when 990s are released and how frequently they appear on the GuideStar website. I want to take this opportunity, we had, just to sort of wrap things up out of respect for the time that we had set aside for today. We're about 1 minute over. We were really thrilled to welcome Ayeola, Julie, and Rosie today. GuideStar couldn't do the work that we do without strong and effective partners, and we certainly are benefiting from that with the United Way today. We hope that you have learned something today, both from your peers, from Ayeola at United Way Worldwide, as well as from GuideStar. You see my contact information here. I will make sure if there are any questions that didn't get answered today, or if you want to send them over to me, or if you have questions for Julie or Rosie, I want to make sure you connect with them at CLC. Please forward those to me as well, and I'll distribute those accordingly. So without further ado, Ayeola, thank you. Rosie and Julie, super impressed with the work that you are doing in St. Louis, and am proud as a representative of GuideStar to be a part of it. Thanks so much for your time today, and we look forward to connecting again at the CLC.